China has been workshopped to the world, with its manufacturing sector driving the country's sustained growth. And Asia's other growing powers, not least India and Indonesia, are now getting in on the act. The demand for Australian resources has boomed as a result, but its manufacturing's deeply in the doldrums. From Canberra, political editor Catherine McGrath.
Australian manufacturing is in a crisis state. 100,000 jobs have gone since the start of the global downturn. Manufacturing still employs 1 million Australians, but it was once the backbone of the entire economy. But those days have long gone. Competition from Asia and a strong dollar have made many businesses uncompetitive. Prime Minister Gillard set up a manufacturing task force with industry input. Boeing Australia's president Ian Thomas is a member.
My role was to represent an Australian manufacturer, so from the industry side, from the business side.
But we want
the group's report has now been delivered.
Now there are some acute pressures on manufacturing, particularly because of the strength of the Australian dollar. It is changing business models in manufacturing. It is bringing pressure on our manufacturing businesses.
Australian manufacturing needs to change. Increased productivity is a key, as is high-tech manufacturing, and increasingly orientating Australian businesses to a global market, particularly in Asia. Boeing's Ian Thomas and the Manufacturing Task Force made 42 recommendations.
There's a very real sense, there's a sense of growing opportunity in the region, and the question really revolves around whether or how far Australia, as Australia, which includes business, which includes government, unions, workforces, and academia and scientific research bodies, can work together to take advantage of the huge set of opportunities that are emergent on our doorstep.
Prime Minister Gillard says the sector is an essential part of the economy.
This is also an era of tremendous opportunity for Australian manufacturing, as we continue to see the incredible growth in the region in which we live, the rise of more middle-class consumers in Asia. We will see a greater demand for cutting-edge manufactured products, and Australia and Australians can play a role in satisfying that demand.
This week in Canberra, manufacturers have gathered for the annual forum of their umbrella organisation, the Australian Industry Group. Here, talk again has turned to the markets of Asia, but this time there was some tough advice from policy heavyweight Ken Henry, who says Australia hasn't been doing enough to engage in the region.
It is ironic that in the past 20 years on many metrics, we seem to have gone backwards, at least in terms of thinking about where Australia's future truly lies. It may be that because of what's happening in our region, it's a sense of complacency has developed. It may be that people have taken it for granted that all of this is going to fall into our laps.
Ken Henry is currently writing a white paper for the government on Australia and the Asian century. He says Asian language skills are urgently needed in this country.
There's a view in some quarters that, well, it's all right. We don't need to upgrade our skills in language, for example, because everybody in the region is going to speak English, you know. Well, that's just nonsense.
Ken Henry has been working on the white paper for 10 months and has consulted both here and overseas. The aim of the project is to examine government policy parameters and business practices and to recommend changes that could encourage even greater interaction and even more business success in Asia. In his speech to the Australian Industry Group, Ken Henry set out a broad agenda calling for the development of Asia-relevant capabilities. He says to achieve this, Australia needs world-class schools, vocational and higher education training, and an education system that acknowledges and recognises Asian culture and history from the earliest years.
Well, I think he's absolutely right. Frankly, I think there are other governments and businesses around the world that have been focused on Asia for quite some time, and it's certainly not lost on some sectors in the Australian economy that Asia is the game. I mean, if you look at the mineral and resources sector. The question is, how far can Australia, as a collective, if you will, and to combine business and government and workforces and academia to leverage the competitive advantages that are here in Australia today, and to tap into the massive growth in the middle class, the massive growth in spending power, the massive growth in living standards in and across Asia, and how can Australia continue to be a premier partner and supplier.
There's much work ahead. Ken Henry's white paper is expected in September.